Welcome to The Explainer. The European Union, it's kind of like a club with 27 members. And like any good club, it needs some rules to keep things running smoothly, especially when it comes to money. So today we're going to break down the EU's playbook for economic oversight, and we'll be using official documents on Malta to see how this whole complex system actually works in the real world.
So how in the world do you keep tabs on the economies of 27 different countries all at the same time? I mean, it sounds like a totally impossible job, right? But the EU actually has a surprisingly methodical, very structured system to do just that.
The official term for it is fiscal surveillance, which, let's be honest, is just a fancy way of saying a financial health checkup. Think of the EU as a doctor, regularly checking a country's economic vital signs, its budgets, its policies, just to make sure everything's looking healthy and sustainable for the long run. And this whole checkup, it follows a pretty strict annual schedule that's built around a few key documents.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty, starting with the very foundation of this entire process, what we're calling the master plan that every single country has to put together.
This document right here is the absolute centerpiece of everything. Yeah, the official name is a bit of a mouthful, the National Medium-Term Fiscal Structural Plan. But just think of it as the country's multi-year economic blueprint. It lays out everything, how much the government is allowed to spend, which big projects are going to get funded, and what major reforms are on the table. It is the master plan that everything else has to follow.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. This plan isn't just something a country writes up and files away in a dusty cabinet. As you can see from this timeline, it's a genuine back and forth. It kicks off in June when the Commission offers some initial guidance. Then, in September, Malta submits its official plan. By November, the Commission comes back with its assessment. And then finally, in January, the plan gets the official green light. It's a structured conversation designed to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Okay, so you've got this big master plan in place. But how does the EU actually check in on the progress year after year? Well, that brings us to the annual cycle. This is where that oversight becomes a predictable, yearly rhythm.
The key here is this constant loop of reporting and getting feedback. Every year, by October, Malta sends in its draft budget. Then, by November, the Commission sends back its notes, its official opinion. And then later, by April, Malta has to report on how well it's actually sticking to that big master plan. It's this simple three-step dance that keeps everyone in sync all year long.
But what happens if a country starts to, veer off course? What if its deficit or its debt starts to climb a little too high? Well, the EU has a special procedure for exactly that kind of scenario.
And, according to the European Commission, this is the current situation for Malta. When you see a phrase like this, it means the EU's oversight is about to get a whole lot stricter, and the country is now required to take very specific steps to fix the problem.
The Excessive Deficit Procedure, or EDP for short, is basically the EU's financial safety net. You could even call it the system's enforcement arm. If a country's deficit or debt goes past the agreed-upon limits, the EDP kicks in, and it forces that country to take concrete, serious action to get its finances back in order.
So, after looking at all these plans and reports and procedures, it's probably worth asking, why does this very detailed, and let's be honest, pretty bureaucratic process even exist? What's the big picture here?
This slide here really shows how the whole system has evolved. In the past, countries would just submit a simple annual update, a stability program. But the new system is so much smarter. It combines everything, spending, big investments, and reforms into a single unified plan. It's a huge shift from just reporting the numbers to actually creating a comprehensive, forward-looking strategy.
So what's the ultimate goal of all this paperwork? At the end of the day, it's about creating a stable economic team. By making sure every member country has solid public finances, the EU can help promote steady growth, avoid any major economic shocks, and, maybe most importantly, protect the stability of the euro for everyone involved. And all of this really leaves us with a pretty fundamental question, doesn't it? Is this deep level of shared oversight an absolutely necessary safeguard to protect the entire union's economy? Or does it go too far and limit a country's freedom to manage its own affairs? That's the central debate. That tension, that's right at the heart of the European project, and it's definitely one worth thinking about.